Hello, my name is Mia Habib. I am the creative person behind Oblik Atelier. And yes, I know that I have added that extra line above E, but I really loved how I drew my logo. Shape. Shape is what I'm after, and oblik is exactly what that means in Croatian. For all these years since I've started Oblik Atelier, I have been committed to trying to create really interesting shapes. This is my creative space. This is Brooklyn Metalworks. It's a community workshop. And usually this place is jam-packed with people, either taking classes, taking workshops, or with few of us that are running our own businesses. My space is very small, but as a jeweler, I don't necessarily need a lot of space. I had my own studio for 10 years, but I really lacked community and exchange of ideas. So I moved to Brooklyn Metalworks a few years ago, and I have not looked back since. This is what I look at each day when I sit at my bench. When it comes to tools, I keep it pretty basic. A few files, pliers, saw frames, and mandrels, and my hands, one of my biggest tools. Recently, I spent a lot of time thinking about how my creative ideas come and what happens to them, especially because I've been mentoring some of the students at various universities. And a lot of the times, these ideas are just in my head, and I'd work directly in metal. Other times, I will create something and it might not be ready to see the light of day. So it ends up actually being shelved in this box, this I'd like to refer to it as metal graveyard. I look at this box very frequently, and sometimes as ideas mature, I tend to pull them out and create something. Other times it just is permanently shelved there, and eventually I will scrap it. I work with wire and sheet, but I attack the process of making in a very similar way. Because of the different shapes, the outcome is actually a completely different form, even though the approach of bending and twisting is very similar. This ring I actually made during the pandemic where I attempted to. However, the wire is too thick and I'm giving it up for right now, but I'm sure I'll revisit it. There's something pretty cool there. When it comes to making something, this is the starting point. Three of the same sheets of strips of metal yield three different designs, or many more in my case. I will take a very similar approach in earrings, rings, and in bracelets and in necklaces as well. When I make, I usually just use my fingers and mandrels and pliers to bend things around. When I start something, especially a new idea, it's a creative journey for me, one that I have no idea what the outcome is going to be. And I would say 80% of the time it looks great and I'm happy. And once I'm completed with that piece and I look at it, it's not infrequent that I stare back at it and think about, like, how the hell did I make that? Will I be able to replicate that for production? But I enjoy the process, so I will redo it again. First time, it's usually a little bit more perfect. A lot of times these pieces, I create mandrels and jigs for them. However, this is how I create a prototype, and I wanted to share this with you. It's made out of brass, and I basically finish every piece with either gold plate or with silver plate. This pair of earrings is called the Wind. I approach the same thing for a ring, and this is a very similar process, and my hands are just the most important tool that I own. So I bend this piece, I mark them, I cut them, I use various different types of tools to cut, depending on if I'm cutting straight angles and uh, not straight angles. But the journey is really, really exciting. This is the Z ring. Sometimes when I'm making something, it's not as exciting. This piece I remade a few times. I actually clipped this a couple of times because I ended up tossing one of them, one of the rings, because it wasn't going anywhere. And it could be a frustrating journey. One where I go back at it and I scrap it. I get extremely frustrated because metal is very unforgiving. It does not want to go back. This is what my face looks like when I break the saw blade. It's not really exciting. When I am finished with a piece and it is a victory, it's such a rewarding feeling, and it's worth all the frustration. This is actually the S ring. Prior to getting to that stage, you have to create or have a moment with the fire. So fire is always exciting. This is the soldering process to create anything. And at the end, when you are filming your last component and you're the only person in the studio, your camera falls off. And this is where I'll sign off and say, thanks for visiting my studio. And a slight disclaimer, usually when a few of us are at the studio these days, we wear masks, but I was there by myself.